Emma thought she was cleaning out her late grandmother's attic until she unlocked a rusted iron chest that exposed a decades-old betrayal, stolen land, and the horrifying truth behind her parents' death. Emma had never liked the attic. Even as a little girl, she avoided it whenever she visited her grandmother's farmhouse. The narrow wooden stairs creaked too loudly, the air smelled of damp paper and old wood, and every corner seemed to hide shadows that shifted when nobody was looking. Her grandmother always kept the attic locked, brushing off questions with a nervous smile and saying, "Some memories are better left untouched." Back then, Emma never understood what that meant. But now, standing alone in the attic years later, those words echoed inside her mind like a warning. Rain hammered against the roof while thunder rolled across the dark evening sky. The entire house felt heavy with silence after her grandmother's funeral. Downstairs, the rooms already looked empty. Furniture had been covered with sheets. Boxes lined the hallway. Her Uncle Richard wanted the property sold immediately, insisting there was no reason to keep an old collapsing farmhouse alive. Emma didn't argue with him earlier, but something about today felt wrong. She moved carefully through the attic with a flashlight in one hand and a dust-covered box in the other. Old family photographs, broken lamps, and stacks of forgotten newspapers surrounded her. Thick cobwebs stretched between wooden beams overhead. The storm outside rattled the windows hard enough to make her flinch. As she bent to lift another box, her foot struck something solid beneath an old blanket. Clang! Emma froze. Slowly, she pulled the dusty fabric away. An iron chest sat hidden underneath. It was small, heavy, and covered in deep rust. The metal corners were worn black with age, and thick iron locks sealed the front shut. It looked ancient, completely different from everything else stored in the attic. Emma stared at it in confusion. She had spent years visiting this house, and had never once seen this chest before. Her heartbeat quickened slightly. "Grandma, what were you hiding up here?" she whispered softly. She knelt beside it and brushed dirt from the surface with her sleeve. There were no labels, no initials, nothing except years of dust and silence. Then suddenly, she remembered the strange key. The night before, while cleaning her grandmother's bedroom, Emma had discovered a small rusted key taped beneath a drawer. At first, she thought it belonged to an old cabinet or forgotten lockbox, but something about it felt important enough to keep. Now staring at the chest, she slowly reached into her pocket. The key felt cold in her trembling hand. "No way," she breathed. Emma inserted the key carefully into the lock. At first, it wouldn't move. The rust resisted as if the chest itself wanted to stay buried forever. She twisted harder. Crack! The lock suddenly shifted. Emma stopped breathing for a moment. Then came a heavy metallic click that echoed through the attic. The chest was unlocked. Outside, lightning flashed through the dusty window, briefly illuminating the room in pale white light. Emma hesitated before lifting the lid. A strange feeling settled deep in her stomach, fear mixed with curiosity. Slowly she opened it. Dust burst upward into the air. Inside were stacks of yellowed papers tied with faded black ribbon, old envelopes, family photographs, and leather folders cracked with age. Everything smelled of time itself. Emma picked up the first bundle carefully. Legal documents, property records, land ownership agreements. Her confusion deepened. She unfolded one paper after another, trying to understand what she was looking at. Names, signatures, official stamps, it all looked real, extremely real. And then her eyes locked onto one detail. Owner Margaret Carter. Her grandmother. Emma frowned. She grabbed another document. Again, her grandmother's name appeared. Another. And another. The deeper she searched, the more impossible it became. Dozens of deeds listed properties across town, land surrounding the shopping plaza, the gas station near the highway, several empty lots near downtown, and even property beneath the local bank itself. Emma's hands trembled harder with every page. Her grandmother had owned all of it. Yet none of it made sense. Emma and her grandmother had struggled financially for years. Medical bills piled up constantly after her grandfather died. Some winters, they barely afforded heating oil. Emma remembered nights when her grandmother skipped meals, pretending she wasn't hungry. If they owned this much land, why had they lived like they had nothing? A loud thunderclap shook the attic windows violently. Emma looked down again at the mountain of hidden documents spread around her knees. The papers weren't random records. They were carefully preserved, secretly protected, almost like someone had hidden them on purpose. Then she noticed something else. Several documents carried strange markings in red ink. Transferred. Disputd. Voided. Emma's breathing slowed. This wasn't just hidden property. Something terrible had happened inside this family years ago. Emma barely slept that night. The storm outside had faded into a cold drizzle, but inside the farmhouse, tension clung to every wall like smoke. She sat on the bedroom floor surrounded by scattered deeds, photographs, and faded legal records, while the old bedside lamp cast a weak yellow glow across the room. Every document led back to the same terrifying question. Why would her grandmother hide all of this? And why had Uncle Richard acted so strangely the moment he saw the chest? Emma replayed the scene in her head over and over again, the fear in his eyes, the way his voice changed, the way he demanded the chest instead of asking what was inside. It didn't feel like surprise. It felt like panic. She picked up another document and studied the signatures carefully. Most of the papers were over 30 years old, but certain names repeated constantly: lawyers, county clerks, witnesses. Some signatures looked rushed and unnatural, almost copied. Others were impossible to verify because the people listed were long dead. Then she noticed Richard's name. Not once. Dozens of times. Emma's stomach tightened. He had signed transfer agreements involving family land. Some documents listed him as a witness. Others showed him approving ownership changes after her grandfather became ill. The deeper she looked, the darker it became. A memory suddenly surfaced from childhood. She remembered hearing her grandmother crying late one night behind a locked kitchen door. Emma had been maybe 10 years old. Richard was there too, shouting angrily. "You should have signed everything years ago," he yelled. Her grandmother answered through tears. "It belongs to this family." Emma never understood the argument back then. Now she finally did. A floorboard creaked outside the bedroom. Emma quickly gathered the documents into a pile. Silence followed. Then came a soft knock at the door. "Emma," Richard's voice called gently. Her heart skipped. She didn't answer immediately. Another knock. "I know you're awake." Emma slowly stood and opened the door halfway. Richard stood in the hallway holding 2 cups of coffee. His expression looked calm now, almost fatherly, but his eyes remained sharp and restless. "I figured you could use this," he said quietly. Emma accepted the cup carefully, without breaking eye contact. "Thanks." For a moment neither spoke. Then Richard glanced toward the papers on the floor behind her. "You've been reading those documents all night." Emma nodded slowly. "You lied to me." Richard sighed deeply and leaned against the doorway. "It's complicated." "No," Emma replied firmly. "Complicated is forgetting where you parked your car. Hiding ownership of half the town isn't complicated." Richard's jaw tightened slightly. "You don't understand the history behind those papers." "Then explain it." He looked away toward the dark hallway. "Your grandfather made mistakes." Emma crossed her arms. So that justifies hiding everything from us. Richard's face hardened instantly. You think life was easy back then, he snapped. Your grandfather was reckless. He gambled money away, trusted the wrong people, and nearly destroyed this family. Emma stared at him silently. But Grandma owned the land, she said carefully, not Grandpa. Richard froze for half a second. A tiny reaction. But Emma caught it. You knew, she whispered. Richard looked back at her slowly. I was trying to protect this family. Protect us from what? His voice lowered. From the truth. The room suddenly felt colder. Emma took a step backward instinctively. Richard noticed. You're making me sound like a monster. He muttered bitterly. Then stop acting like one. His eyes darkened instantly. For the first time, the warm uncle she grew up with disappeared completely. The mask slipped. You have no idea what people are capable of when money is involved, he said quietly. Emma felt fear crawl into her chest. Richard slowly walked past her into the room and picked up one of the deeds from the floor. You know what this land did to this family? He asked. It poisoned everyone. Emma remained silent. Richard stared at the paper for several seconds before continuing. Your grandfather trusted people who turned against him. Lawsuits started piling up. Debt grew. People wanted pieces of the land. Politicians, bankers, businessmen, everybody wanted something. And you helped them take it? Emma asked coldly. Richard looked at her sharply. You think I had a choice? Emma's voice trembled slightly. There's always a choice. For a moment, guilt flashed across Richard's face. Real guilt. But it vanished just as quickly. Then he carefully placed the deed back down and stepped closer to her. Listen to me very carefully, he said in a low voice. Some things should stay buried. If you keep digging into this, people will get hurt. Emma's heartbeat pounded harder. Is that a threat? Richard didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked directly at the iron chest sitting near the bed. And the way he stared at it made Emma realize something horrifying. He wasn't afraid of losing money. He was afraid of what else might be hidden inside it. The farmhouse had never felt this quiet before. Not peaceful quiet. The kind of silence that presses against your chest and makes every tiny sound feel dangerous. Emma sat alone on the floor beside her grandmother's bed, while rainwater slid slowly down the bedroom windows. The old iron chest remained open beside her, surrounded by scattered papers and faded photographs that had completely changed the way she saw her family. Her hands trembled from exhaustion. She had spent hours reading legal records, land transfers, and handwritten notes, but her mind kept returning to one terrifying question. What exactly was Uncle Richard hiding? She reached back into the chest carefully, searching beneath another stack of documents. Most papers were cold and stiff with age, but near the bottom, her fingers touched something softer. An envelope. Cream-colored. Old. Her breath caught instantly when she saw her name written across the front in shaky handwriting. Emma. It was her grandmother's writing. Emma stared at the envelope for several long seconds, afraid to open it. A strange feeling settled deep inside her stomach, as though some invisible part of her already knew the letter would change everything. Outside, thunder rolled across the dark sky again. Slowly, she slid her finger beneath the seal and unfolded the paper inside. The handwriting was uneven, as if written by trembling hands. My dear Emma, if you are reading this, then I'm no longer here to protect you. Emma swallowed hard. Tears already burned behind her eyes. There are truths buried inside this family that I prayed would never reach you, but secrets do not disappear. They only grow heavier with time. Emma wiped her eyes and continued reading. Your Uncle Richard will try to convince you that everything I hid was for the good of the family. Do not believe him." Her breathing slowed. "Your grandfather never willingly lost our land. It was taken piece by piece through forged papers, threats, and corruption." Emma looked down at the legal deeds scattered across the floor. Suddenly, everything made horrifying sense. The fake signatures, the hidden records, the fear in Richard's eyes. Her grandmother had been protecting proof all these years. Emma kept reading. "Your father discovered the truth before anyone else." The room seemed to freeze around her. Her father. Emma's chest tightened painfully. She barely remembered him now, only flashes of laughter, strong hands lifting her into the air, and the smell of engine oil on his jacket whenever he came home from work. He died when she was only 8 years old. A car accident. That's what everyone always said. A tragic accident during heavy rain on an empty road. Emma's hands shook harder as she continued. "When your father confronted Richard about the missing land, they argued for weeks. Your father wanted to expose everyone involved." A tear rolled slowly down Emma's cheek. Richard begged him to stay quiet. Emma could almost hear it now. The shouting, the threats, the fear her grandmother must have lived with every day. Then came the sentence that shattered her completely. "The night your parents died was not an accident." Emma stopped breathing. The words blurred before her eyes. "No." Her heartbeat pounded violently inside her ears. She read the line again. And again. As if repetition might somehow change it. But it didn't. The paper trembled in her hands. Richard only meant to scare them. He arranged for someone to tamper with your father's car after another argument about the deeds, but things went terribly wrong. Emma covered her mouth instantly to stop herself from crying out. Her entire body felt numb. The crash, the funeral, the years of grief. All of it suddenly looked different. Not fate. Not bad luck. Murder. Emma's breathing became uneven as memories flooded back into her mind. She remembered standing beside 2 coffins while rain poured over black umbrellas. She remembered her grandmother holding her tightly while Richard stood nearby pretending to comfort everyone. Pretending. All these years pretending. Tears streamed down Emma's face now. She continued reading through blurred vision. "I stayed silent because Richard threatened to destroy what little remained of this family. I was afraid of losing you too." Emma pressed the letter against her chest. For years, she had blamed herself for surviving the accident. Part of her always wondered why she had been spared while her parents were taken away. Now she understood the horrifying truth. They were never supposed to die. Someone made a choice. Someone inside her own family. A loud creak suddenly echoed from downstairs. Emma's head snapped toward the bedroom door. Silence followed. Then, the sound of the front door opening slowly. Her pulse spiked instantly. Heavy footsteps entered the house. Emma stood carefully, clutching the letter tightly in one hand. The footsteps moved across the living room below. Slow. Measured. Then came Uncle Richard's voice. "Emma." Her blood ran cold. The footsteps started climbing the stairs. "I know you found something," he called out calmly. Emma backed away from the door. Every instinct inside her screamed danger now. She looked down once more at her grandmother's final words written across the bottom of the page. "If Richard discovers you know the truth, run." Emma locked the bedroom door with shaking hands as Uncle Richard's footsteps climbed the staircase outside. Every sound inside the old farmhouse suddenly felt louder, the rain tapping against the windows, the groaning floorboards, even her own breathing. The letter from her grandmother remained clutched tightly in her hand. She could still see the words burned into her mind. The night your parents died was not an accident. A heavy knock struck the door. Emma, Richard called calmly, opened the door. She stayed silent. Another knock. Softer this time. We need to talk. Emma stepped backward slowly until her legs touched the edge of the bed. Her heart pounded so hard it almost hurt. She had spent her entire life trusting this man. He attended every birthday after her parents died. He helped pay for school supplies when money was tight. He hugged her at funerals. And all along, he had been hiding something monstrous. Emma, Richard said again, you're scaring yourself. Her eyes filled with anger. No, she shouted through the door. You're the one who should be scared. Silence followed. For several long seconds, the hallway outside became completely still. Then Richard spoke again, but this time his voice sounded colder. You read the letter. Emma didn't answer. You don't understand the full story. She wiped tears from her face furiously. My parents trusted you. The floorboards creaked outside the door as Richard leaned against it. Your father was stubborn, he muttered. He wouldn't let things go. Emma's stomach twisted. So you killed him. No, Richard snapped suddenly. The force in his voice made Emma flinch. Another silence followed. Then his tone softened again, quieter now. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. Emma closed her eyes. There it was. Not denial. Not shock. An excuse. Richard exhaled heavily outside the door. You think I wanted any of this? He asked bitterly. You think I enjoyed watching this family destroy itself over land? Emma stared at the door without speaking. Richard continued talking, as though years of buried guilt were finally breaking loose. Your grandfather made terrible decisions. Debt kept growing. The county threatened foreclosure. Investors wanted the property. Everybody wanted something from us. And you sold the family to save yourself, Emma whispered. You were a child, Richard replied sharply. You didn't see what I saw, banks breathing down our necks, lawyers threatening lawsuits, your father running around acting like some hero while the entire family was collapsing. Emma's chest tightened painfully. He was trying to protect us. He was trying to ruin everything. The sudden anger in Richard's voice echoed through the hallway. Emma heard him packing now. Restless. Agitated. I worked for years fixing your grandfather's mistakes, he growled. I made deals to keep food on the table. I kept this house standing while everybody else sat around blaming me. Emma looked around the bedroom slowly. Peeling wallpaper. Cracked ceiling paint. Old furniture repaired 100 times. This wasn't a house protected by love anymore. It was a house poisoned by greed. Richard stopped packing. When your father found the hidden deeds, he threatened to expose all of us, he said quietly. He didn't understand what powerful people were involved. Emma's breathing slowed. All of us? She asked carefully. Richard hesitated. Too long. Then she realized something even worse. He hadn't acted alone. There were others. Officials. Lawyers. People in town. An entire network built around stolen property and lies. You ruined innocent lives, Emma whispered. Richard laughed bitterly from outside the door. Innocent, he repeated. There are no innocent people when money gets involved. Emma felt sick hearing the emptiness in his voice. Years ago, greed had started as desperation. Maybe Richard truly believed he was saving the family at first. Maybe he convinced himself every forged signature and secret deal was temporary. But greed changes people slowly. Quietly. One lie becomes another. One stolen document becomes 20. And eventually, the the person staring back in the mirror becomes someone unrecognizable. Richard spoke again, his voice lower now. "Do you know what it feels like watching everyone depend on you while secretly hating you?" he asked. "Your grandmother judged me every day. Your father treated me like a criminal before anything even happened. Because you were one." A loud bang hit the door suddenly. Emma jumped. "You have no idea what I sacrificed," Richard shouted. The doorknob rattled violently. "I carried this family for decades." Another bang. The old wooden frame cracked slightly. Emma backed toward the window instinctively. Outside, rain poured across the dark field surrounding the farmhouse. Richard's breathing sounded heavier now. Unstable. "You think the town cared about your family?" he yelled through the door. "Nobody cared. The second people smelled money, they turned into animals." Emma looked at the chest sitting near the bed. All this destruction. All this death. Over land. Over ownership. Over greed. Families destroyed. Lives stolen. Trust buried forever. And the most painful part of all, it didn't happen overnight. It happened one selfish choice at a time. The courtroom was silent when the final verdict was read. Not a single cough. Not a single whisper. Only the distant hum of ceiling lights and the faint scratching of a reporter's pen somewhere near the back row. Emma sat motionless in the front row, her hands resting tightly in her lap while flashes from reporters' cameras lit up the room around her every few seconds. Across the courtroom, Uncle Richard looked nothing like the confident man who once controlled every conversation inside the farmhouse. Now he looked smaller somehow. Defeated. Gray-haired. Exhausted. The expensive suits were gone. The sharp voice that once terrified people had disappeared. Even his posture had changed. His shoulders sagged forward as though the weight of decades had finally crushed him all at once. The trial had lasted nearly 3 months. 3 long months of testimonies, evidence, hidden records, and horrifying truths spilling into public view one piece at a time. Investigators uncovered forged property transfers, bribed county officials, fake signatures, missing tax records, and decades of hidden fraud connected to the Carter family land. Every week revealed something worse. Former clerks confessed to altering legal documents for cash. Lawyers admitted to helping transfer properties illegally. Retired officials who once seemed respected were dragged into the scandal after evidence from the iron chest exposed everything they tried to bury. The town watched in disbelief as respected names collapsed overnight. But none of it shocked people more than the truth about Emma's parents. The damaged brake lines. The mechanic reports hidden for years. The threats Richard made after Emma's father tried exposing the stolen deeds. Richard insisted again and again that he never meant for anyone to die. But the courtroom no longer cared about intentions. Choices had consequences. And now those consequences stood fully exposed beneath bright courtroom lights for the entire world to see. The judge adjusted his glasses slowly before reading the final sentence. "Richard Carter, this court finds you guilty on all charges." The words echoed heavily across the room. Emma lowered her eyes briefly. Even after everything, hearing it out loud still hurt. Then came the sentence. Life imprisonment. A quiet gasp spread through the audience. Someone near the back began crying softly. Richard lowered his head slowly, as though part of him had expected this moment for years. For a brief second he looked toward Emma. Not with anger. Not with hatred. Just emptiness. A hollow expression so empty, it almost frightened her more than his rage ever had. As if greed had slowly eaten away every human part of him long ago, leaving behind nothing but fear, guilt, and loneliness. Emma stared back silently. She expected to feel satisfaction after hearing the verdict. Closure, relief, maybe even victory. But instead, she only felt tired. Tired of funerals. Tired of lies. Tired of discovering that almost every memory from her childhood had been built on hidden pain. Most of all, she felt tired of carrying grief that never belonged to her in the first place. Outside the courthouse, reporters rushed toward her immediately. Microphones surrounded her from every direction. "Emma, what will happen to the Carter properties now? Will you sell the land? How much is the estate worth today? Do you forgive your uncle?" Camera flashes exploded around her. People expected excitement, wealth, revenge. But Emma simply stood quietly beneath the courthouse steps, while cold wind moved through her hair. Then she said softly, "My grandmother protected this community her entire life. I plan to do the same." The next morning, those words appeared on every local news station in town. At first, nobody believed her. People assumed she would eventually sell the land to developers and leave town forever like wealthy heirs usually did. Some even accused her of pretending to care for publicity. But weeks passed, then months, and Emma did the exact opposite. The first thing she restored was the old diner near the highway. The same diner where her grandmother used to bring her every Saturday morning when she was little. Emma still remembered sitting by the foggy windows eating pancakes while truck drivers laughed loudly nearby. The diner had nearly shut down after years of financial problems. The roof leaked whenever it rained. Half the booths were torn apart. The owner was preparing to close permanently. Without telling anyone, Emma quietly paid the diner's overdue debts and funded the repairs anonymously. New paint covered the cracked walls. Broken lights were replaced. The old neon sign flickered back to life again after nearly 10 years. On reopening day, the elderly waitress recognized Emma immediately. Tears filled the woman's eyes. "You look just like your mother," she whispered emotionally. Emma smiled softly. For the first time in years, hearing those words no longer shattered her inside. After the diner came the school. The elementary school roof had leaked for almost 6 years because the district couldn't afford repairs. Teachers placed buckets across classrooms whenever storms passed through town. Emma funded the entire renovation quietly. New windows were installed. The library reopened. Children finally had proper heating during winter again. Yet she refused to place her name anywhere on the building. She didn't want statues, or praise, or attention. She simply wanted the suffering to stop. Then came the struggling families. Emma discovered several elderly residents were months away from losing their homes because unpaid taxes kept growing every year. Quietly, she paid them off. A widow who worked at the grocery store suddenly received an anonymous letter confirming her mortgage had been cleared. A mechanic struggling to keep his late father's repair shop open discovered someone had settled his debt overnight. Word spread quickly through town. People who once whispered about the Carter family with suspicion slowly began speaking their name with respect again. But healing wasn't easy. Everywhere Emma went, memories followed her. The gas station near the highway reminded her of road trips with her father. The hardware store reminded her of her grandfather carrying lumber home covered in sawdust. Even certain songs playing in restaurants brought back flashes of her mother, singing softly in the kitchen years ago. And the farmhouse hurt most of all. Some nights Emma walked through its halls and still expected to hear her grandmother's footsteps downstairs. Other nights she woke suddenly, after dreaming about the stormy night she discovered the chest. The house no longer felt haunted by ghosts. It felt haunted by grief. One evening near the end of autumn, Emma finally returned to the attic alone. The storm season had passed, leaving the sky calm and golden outside the dusty windows. Workers repaired most of the farmhouse downstairs, but Emma intentionally left the attic untouched, exactly as her grandmother left it. The rusted iron chest still sat quietly in the corner beneath soft sunlight. Emma walked toward it slowly and knelt beside it. For several seconds, she simply stared at it. One small chest. One hidden truth. And yet it changed everything. She opened it carefully one final time. Inside remained the same faded papers, old photographs, letters and legal records that destroyed her old life and rebuilt a new one. Emma picked up a photograph gently. Her parents smiled back at her from another lifetime. Young, happy, alive. Her father held her mother close while standing beside the farmhouse porch years before tragedy entered their lives. Emma's eyes filled slowly with tears. So much pain, she whispered. For years, anger consumed her after learning the truth. Some nights she imagined screaming at Richard. Other nights she wondered if hatred would poison her forever the same way greed poisoned him. But over time, she realized something important. If she allowed anger to define the rest of her life, then greed had already won. Because greed didn't only steal land. It stole trust. It stole peace. It destroyed families slowly from the inside until love itself became unrecognizable. Richard spent his entire life chasing ownership, power, and control. And in the end, he lost absolutely everything. Emma carefully placed the photograph back inside the chest before unfolding her grandmother's final letter once more. The paper had softened from being opened so many times. Her eyes stopped on one sentence near the bottom. Do not let bitterness become the inheritance passed to you. Emma closed her eyes tightly. A tear slid down her cheek. Her grandmother understood something Richard never did. Money can rebuild buildings, but only love can rebuild people. A soft wind drifted through the attic window, while warm sunlight filled the room gently. For the first time since discovering the chest, Emma no longer felt trapped by the past. She finally understood why her grandmother protected those documents for so many years. Not for wealth, not for revenge, for truth. Because truth matters even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. Months later, the farmhouse porch became Emma's favorite place again. Every evening, she sat in the old wooden chair her grandfather once used, while sunsets painted the fields gold across the horizon. Children's laughter echoed from nearby homes again. The diner stayed busy every weekend. The school playground was finally full. The town slowly came back to life. One quiet evening, Emma looked toward the fading sunlight and smiled softly. You were protecting all of us, Grandma, she whispered. The wind moved gently through the trees surrounding the farmhouse. And somehow, the house no longer felt heavy with secrets. It felt like home again. Upstairs, the rusted iron chest remained untouched in the attic. Not as a symbol of betrayal anymore, but as proof that truth can survive even the darkest years hidden away. Because eventually, lies collapse beneath their own weight. But truth waits patiently. And when it finally comes into the light, it gives people something greed never can. Peace. And sometimes, peace becomes the greatest inheritance of all. Moral, greed may create temporary power, but truth, kindness, and compassion are the only things strong enough to heal broken families, restore trust, and rebuild lives destroyed by darkness. Disclaimer: this story is completely fictional and created for entertainment purposes only. Any names, characters, places, or events are purely imaginary. Similarities to real people or real-life incidents are purely coincidental.